A family of four, packed into their car, laughter echoing through the speakers as they drive down a quiet Oklahoma highway. The sun is setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. They're on vacation, a chance to escape the chaos of everyday life, to create memories that would last a lifetime. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that their dream getaway was about to become a nightmare. It started with a simple detour, a wrong turn that led them down a deserted road. The kind of road where the trees seem to close in around you, where the only sound is the hum of your engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. They thought they were lost. They thought they'd find their way back, but what they found instead was a man who would change their lives forever. This wasn't just a random act of violence. This wasn't a crime of passion or a desperate act of survival. This was the work of a predator, a serial killer who had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And strike he did. But here's the thing. What happened next wasn't just a tragedy. It was a mystery, a puzzle so twisted and complex that even the most seasoned investigators were left stunned. Because just when they thought they had the answers, just when they thought they were closing in on the truth, they discovered something that turned everything they thought they knew upside down. This is the story of the Thompson family, a story of hope, of horror, and of a twist so shocking it will leave you questioning everything you think you know about the people around you. This is the story of a serial killer who didn't just take lives, he shattered them. And this is the story of how one family's vacation became a nightmare they would never wake up from. It was the summer of 2018, and the Thompson family was like any other American family looking forward to a break from the daily grind. Marcus Thompson, a 42-year-old high school teacher, had spent months planning this trip. His wife, Shanice, 38, a talented baker with a smile that could light up a room, had packed enough snacks and games to keep their two kids entertained for the long drive. 12-year-old Jamal, a budding athlete with a love for basketball, and his younger sister, 9-year-old Keisha, a bright and curious girl who dreamed of becoming a scientist, were buzzing with excitement. They had left their home in Atlanta early that morning, the car packed to the brim with suitcases, coolers, and the kind of hopeful energy that only a family vacation can bring. The drive to Oklahoma was long but filled with laughter, sing-alongs to their favorite songs, and the occasional pit stop for snacks and stretch breaks. By the time they reached their destination, a cozy cabin nestled in the woods near Lake Eufaula, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape. The cabin was perfect. It had everything they needed: a spacious living room, a fully stocked kitchen, and a porch that overlooked the lake. The kids immediately claimed their rooms while Marcus and Shanice unpacked and settled in. That first night, they grilled burgers, made s'mores over a crackling fire, and shared stories under a sky full of stars. It was the kind of moment they'd remember forever, a snapshot of happiness frozen in time. But as the days went on, something felt off. It was subtle at first. A strange car parked down the road, a shadow moving in the trees, the faint sound of footsteps outside their cabin at night. Marcus brushed it off as his imagination, and Shanice tried to focus on enjoying the trip. After all, they were in the middle of nowhere. What could possibly go wrong? What they didn't know was that they weren't alone. Someone had been watching them from the moment they arrived. Someone who had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Someone who had done this before. By the third day of their vacation, the Thompson family's dream getaway would take a dark and terrifying turn. What started as a peaceful retreat would soon become a fight for survival. A fight that would leave investigators scrambling for answers and a community in shock. The morning of July 15th started like any other at the cabin resort. The sun rose over Lake Eufaula, casting a soft glow across the water. Birds chirped in the trees and the faint hum of cicadas filled the air. But inside cabin 12, where the Thompson family had been staying, there was only silence. The Thompsons were supposed to check out that morning. They had plans to visit a nearby national park before heading back to Atlanta. But when the front desk called their cabin to remind them of checkout time, there was no answer. Concerned, the staff knocked on the door. Still, no response. It wasn't until they used a master key to enter the cabin that they realized something was terribly wrong. The scene inside was unsettling. The Thompsons' belongings were still there, suitcases half-packed, clothes neatly folded on the bed, a pair of Jamal's sneakers by the door. But the family was gone. The cabin was eerily quiet, save for the faint creak of a door swaying in the breeze. As the staff looked closer, they began to notice signs of a struggle. A lamp had been knocked over, its bulb shattered on the floor. A trail of blood, faint but unmistakable, led from the living room to the back door. And near the door, a single footprint, a man's size 11 boot print, was pressed into the dirt. The staff immediately called the police. When officers arrived, they began to piece together what little they could. The Thompsons' car was still parked outside, untouched. Their phones, wallets, and IDs were all inside the cabin. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. But who would want to harm the Thompsons? By all accounts, they were the picture of a happy, loving family. Marcus was a beloved high school teacher, known for his patience and dedication to his students. Shanice ran a small bakery in their neighborhood, where she was famous for her peach cobbler and warm smile. Jamal and Keisha were bright, well-behaved kids with dreams as big as their imaginations. They were the kind of family everyone rooted for, the kind of family that didn't deserve this. As investigators began to interview neighbors and other guests at the resort, a chilling detail emerged. A man staying in a cabin 2 doors down reported hearing screams late the previous night. "I thought it was just kids playing," he said. "You know, the kind of noise you hear at a family resort. But now I'm not so sure." Another witness recalled seeing a man lurking near the Thompsons' cabin earlier that evening. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie, and seemed to be watching the family from a distance. When approached, he quickly disappeared into the woods. The police began to search the area, but the dense forest and winding trails made it difficult to track anyone or anything. As the hours turned into days, the investigation grew more desperate. What had happened to the Thompsons? Were they still alive? And if not, who could have done this? But just when it seemed like the case had hit a dead end, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A gas station clerk, going over security footage from the night of the disappearance, noticed something unusual. A man matching the description of the hooded figure had stopped at the station around midnight. He was alone, but in the back seat of his car, something, or someone, was moving. The clerk didn't think much of it at the time, but now, with the Thompsons missing and the entire state on edge, that footage would become the key to unlocking the mystery. This was no ordinary crime. This was the work of someone who knew what they were doing, someone who had done this before. And as investigators would soon discover, this was only the beginning. As the sun rose on the 4th day of the Thompson family's disappearance, the small town near Lake Eufaula was buzzing with activity. Police cars lined the streets, their lights flashing in the early morning haze. Search teams combed the woods, their dogs barking as they followed faint scents through the underbrush. News vans crowded the perimeter of the resort, reporters speaking in hushed tones as they prepared their broadcasts. The investigation was in full swing, but the questions far outweighed the answers. Where were the Thompsons? Who had taken them? And why? Detectives began by retracing the family's steps. They interviewed everyone who had seen or spoken to the Thompsons during their stay. The resort staff, other guests, even the cashier at the nearby convenience store where Marcus had bought milk and snacks the day before they vanished. But no one could provide a clear lead. Then, something unexpected happened. As detectives dug deeper into the case, they began to notice a pattern. Over the past 5 years, there had been several unsolved disappearances in the area, families who had gone on vacation and never returned. At first, these cases were treated as isolated incidents, but now, with the Thompsons added to the list, investigators couldn't ignore the similarities. Could this be the work of a serial killer? To answer that question, detectives turned to Dr. Angela Carter, a renowned criminal profiler with decades of experience studying the minds of predators. The killer likely targeted families to maximize fear and control, Dr. Carter explained. Families are seen as vulnerable, especially in unfamiliar environments. By taking them, the killer not only inflicts pain on the victims, but also sends a message to the community. No one is safe. The profile was chilling. The killer was likely someone who blended into the background. A drifter, perhaps, or someone who worked in the area. He would have been familiar with the terrain, able to move through the woods undetected, and he would have had a vehicle large enough to transport multiple victims. Armed with this new information, investigators began to re-examine the evidence. They revisited the gas station security footage, zooming in on the man in the hoodie. They enhanced the image, hoping to catch a glimpse of his face or a license plate, but the footage was grainy, and the man's features were obscured. Then, a breakthrough. A local mechanic came forward with a crucial piece of information. He remembered servicing a dark-colored van a few weeks earlier. The driver had been acting strangely, nervous, impatient, and unwilling to make eye contact. The mechanic had thought nothing of it at the time, but now, with the Thompsons missing, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Police quickly put out a BOLO, a be on the lookout alert, for the van. They also began to cross-reference the description with other cases in the area. What they found was shocking. In each of the previous disappearances, witnesses had reported seeing a dark-colored van near the scene. In one case, a child who had managed to escape described being held in the back of a van before being released. "He told me to run and never look back," the child said, "but I could hear him laughing as I ran." But the biggest shock was yet to come, because as investigators closed in on their suspect, they would uncover a twist so unexpected it would change everything they thought they knew about the case. This was no ordinary investigation. This was a hunt for a monster, and the clock was ticking. Another breakthrough, one that would change the course of the case forever. It came from an unlikely source, a gas station clerk named Linda, who worked the night shift at a remote station about 30 miles from the cabin resort. Linda had been reviewing security footage from the night of the Thompsons' disappearance as part of a routine inventory check. That's when she saw something that made her blood run cold. There, on the grainy black and white screen, was Marcus Thompson. He was standing at the counter buying a bottle of water and a pack of gum. But what caught Linda's attention wasn't Marcus. It was the man standing behind him. Tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a dark hoodie pulled low over his face. The man seemed to be watching Marcus intently. When Marcus turned to leave, the man followed him out the door. Linda immediately called the police. When detectives arrived, they reviewed the footage frame by frame. The man in the hoodie was careful to keep his face hidden, but there was one moment, a split second, when the camera caught a glimpse of his profile. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Using facial recognition software, investigators were able to identify the man as 34-year-old Darius Cole, a drifter with a history of petty crimes, theft, trespassing, and disorderly conduct. Darius had no fixed address and no known ties to the area, but what made him a person of interest wasn't just his presence at the gas station that night. It was his connection to the dark-colored van that had been spotted near the scene of multiple disappearances. Darius had been seen driving a similar van in the months leading up to the Thompsons' disappearance. Witnesses described him as quiet, almost reclusive, but with a temper that could flare up without warning. He was the kind of man who could blend into a crowd one minute and vanish into the shadows the next. But was Darius Cole capable of murder? Some investigators believed he was. His criminal record, while minor, suggested a pattern of antisocial behavior, and his familiarity with the area made him a prime suspect. But others weren't so sure. Darius had no history of violent crime, and there was no direct evidence linking him to the Thompsons' disappearance. As the debate raged on, a new theory emerged. What if Darius wasn't acting alone? What if he had an accomplice, someone who helped him plan and carry out the abductions? This theory gained traction when investigators discovered that Darius had been seen with another man in the weeks leading up to the Thompsons' disappearance. Described as shorter and stockier than Darius, the man had been spotted driving the van on several occasions. Was he a partner in crime? Or was he just another drifter passing through town like so many others? The questions multiplied, but the answers remained elusive. What investigators needed was a smoking gun, something that would tie Darius Cole directly to the Thompsons. And then, they found it. During a search of Darius's most recent known address, a rundown motel room on the outskirts of town, detectives discovered a chilling piece of evidence. Hidden under the floorboards was a small, blood-stained bracelet. It was Keisha Thompson's bracelet, the one she had been wearing the night she disappeared. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. For the first time, there was tangible proof linking Darius Cole to the Thompsons. But even as detectives celebrated the breakthrough, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Because while the bracelet placed Darius at the scene, it didn't explain how or why he had targeted the Thompsons. And it didn't answer the most pressing question of all. Where were Marcus, Shanice, Jamal, and Keisha now? As the investigation entered its next phase, one thing was clear. Darius Cole was no ordinary suspect. He was a predator, a master of deception, and a man who had managed to stay one step ahead of the law for years. But his luck was about to run out. Because as detectives closed in on him, they would uncover a secret so dark, so horrifying it would change everything they thought they knew about the case. This was no longer just a search for a missing family. This was a hunt for the truth. And the truth, as they would soon discover, was more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The investigation into Darius Cole had already revealed a chilling connection to the Thompson family's disappearance. But what detectives uncovered next would send shockwaves through the entire community and redefine the scope of the case entirely. It started with a routine DNA analysis. Investigators had collected samples from Darius's motel room, including the blood-stained bracelet belonging to Keisha Thompson. But when the results came back, they revealed something no one had expected. Darius's DNA didn't just match the evidence from the Thompson case, it matched evidence from two other crime scenes, both of which involved missing families. The first was a case from 3 years earlier, when a family of 5 had vanished during a camping trip in the same region. The second was a more recent disappearance, just 6 months before the Thompsons, involving a young couple and their infant child. In both cases, the families had been last seen near remote cabins or campgrounds, and in both cases, there had been signs of a struggle. Suddenly, the pieces began to fall into place. Darius Cole wasn't just a suspect in the Thompson case. He was a serial killer responsible for at least 3 separate abductions and murders. The revelation sent investigators scrambling to re-examine every detail of the case. They combed through old files, re-interviewed witnesses, and even revisited the scenes of the earlier disappearances. What they found was both horrifying and heartbreaking. In the case of the family who had vanished during the camping trip, investigators discovered a hidden campsite deep in the woods. It was there that they found remnants of a struggle, torn clothing, broken branches, and a child's toy lying abandoned in the dirt. Nearby, they uncovered a shallow grave containing the remains of 2 adults and 3 children. The second case, involving the young couple and their infant, yielded even more disturbing evidence. A search of the area near their last known location revealed a makeshift bunker, dug into the side of a hill. Inside, investigators found chains, restraints, and a collection of personal items belonging to the victims. It was clear that Darius had used the bunker as a holding cell, a place to keep his victims while he decided their fate. But perhaps the most chilling discovery came from Darius's own past. As detectives dug deeper into his background, they uncovered a pattern of behavior that stretched back decades. Darius had grown up in a series of foster homes, moving from place to place after being abandoned by his parents at a young age. He had a history of violence and instability, but he had always managed to evade serious consequences. He was a master manipulator, Dr. Monroe explained. He knew how to fly under the radar, how to gain people's trust, and how to disappear when things got too hot. That's what made him so dangerous. As the scope of Darius's crimes became clear, investigators realized they were dealing with something far more sinister than they had initially thought. This wasn't just a case of a single family's disappearance. It was a pattern of predation, a series of calculated acts of violence that had gone undetected for years. But even as the evidence against Darius mounted, one question remained unanswered. Where were the Thompsons? The discovery of the other victims' remains had raised the grim possibility that Marcus, Shanice, Jamal, and Keisha might have met the same fate. But without definitive proof, investigators held out hope that they might still be alive. That hope was shattered when a team of search dogs, combing a remote area near the cabin resort, made a gruesome discovery. Buried beneath a pile of rocks and leaves were the remains of 4 people. Dental records confirmed what investigators had feared. It was the Thompson family. The news sent shockwaves through the community. For weeks, people had held out hope that the Thompsons might be found alive. But now, that hope was gone. As investigators pieced together the final moments of the Thompson family's lives, a chilling picture began to emerge. Darius had lured them to a remote location under the guise of offering help. Once there, he had overpowered them, using the same methods he had employed in his previous crimes. The arrest of Darius Cole brought a sense of closure to the investigation, but for the community, the Thompson family's story was far from over. The loss of Marcus, Shanice, Jamal, and Keisha left a void that could never be filled. A void felt not just by their loved ones, but by everyone who had followed the case. But as the community mourned, questions lingered. How had Darius Cole managed to evade capture for so long? What drove him to commit such heinous acts? And could anything have been done to prevent the Thompsons' tragedy? He's a classic example of a psychopath, explained Dr. Lisa Monroe, the forensic psychologist who had been consulting on the case. He lacks empathy, sees people as objects, and derives pleasure from exerting control over others. But what makes him particularly dangerous is his ability to blend in. He's not the monster people expect. He's the man next door. As the legal process unfolded, the community struggled to come to terms with the reality of what had happened. Darius Cole was currently awaiting trial, facing multiple charges of kidnapping and murder. But for many, the trial felt like a formality. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and there was little doubt about the outcome. Still, the case raised important questions about how society deals with predators like Darius. Could more have been done to identify him before he claimed more victims? Were there warning signs that had been overlooked? And how can we better protect ourselves and our loved ones from similar dangers? We're left with a question, one that's as important as it is unsettling. What would you do if you sensed danger during a family vacation? How can we better protect ourselves from predators like Darius Cole? The answers aren't easy, but they're worth seeking. Because while we can't control the actions of others, we can control how we prepare, how we respond, and how we honor those who have been lost. This is the story of the Thompson family, a story of love, loss, and the enduring power of hope. And it's a story that reminds us to cherish every moment with the people we hold dear, because in the end, that's what matters most. If this story has gripped you, if it's made you pause and reflect on the fragility of life and the darkness that can hide in plain sight, then don't let it end here. True crime isn't just about the horrors. It's about understanding, awareness, and honoring the lives that were lost. By sharing this video, you're helping to keep the memory of the Thompson family alive and spreading awareness that could save lives. Hit the like button if this story moved you, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime content that sheds light on the cases that haunt us. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update, and most importantly, stay safe. Trust your instincts, be aware of your surroundings, and never hesitate to speak up if something feels wrong. The world can be a beautiful place, but it's up to all of us to look out for one another. Thank you for watching, and remember, every story matters. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. What steps do you take to stay safe when traveling? What lessons can we learn from the Thompson family's story? Your voice could make a difference.